Have you ever met someone who seems unshaken by life's chaos, someone who radiates calm and joy no matter the circumstances? In a quiet village surrounded by mountains and meadows, there lived an old woman who became the soul of the community, not because of her wealth or status, but because of her unshakable happiness. People would travel from every corner of the village just to talk with her, to seek advice, to feel the warmth of her presence. What made her so magnetic was that she didn't just smile when life was good, she smiled even when things went wrong. She was, in every sense, the embodiment of peace. One day, a young man from the village who had grown tired of feeling frustrated and lost came to visit her. He had seen her laugh during hard winters and comfort others through personal loss. He asked her what everyone had wondered: why are you always happy? Don't you ever feel sad when bad things happen? The old woman didn't offer a complicated theory or a rehearsed speech. Instead, she smiled, the kind of smile that comes from someone who has lived and lost and learned. She said, "My dear, happiness is not something the world hands to you when it feels generous. It is something you create within yourself. Life will never stop throwing challenges at you, but you get to decide whether those challenges break you or build you." This opening insight serves as the foundation of a deeper truth we'll uncover in this story: that happiness is a decision, a habit, and a practice. Just like physical strength comes from repetition at the gym, emotional strength comes from repetition in mindset. The old woman's life wasn't free from pain, but she chose to anchor herself to a mindset that allowed her to find light even in the darkest moments. And that mindset, as we'll soon see, didn't just change her life, it changed the entire village. The young man sat quietly, watching the old woman's eyes as she began to tell the story of her past, not the curated, polished version people like to share, but the raw and painful truth. She had once lived a happy life with her husband and children. They weren't wealthy, but their hearts were full. Every evening, they would sit together, laugh over simple meals, and dream about the future. But that dream shattered when her husband fell seriously ill. They didn't have the money for medicine. She did everything she could, borrowed, begged, prayed, but nothing worked. One morning, she woke up, and he was gone. Just like that. The man she had built her world around had vanished, and she was left with children, grief, and an unbearable silence in the house. She didn't pretend she handled it gracefully. She wept for days, weeks, maybe months. She stopped caring about things she once loved. She couldn't taste her food or hear music the same way. Life had lost its color. But then, one day, as she watched her children play in the dirt outside the window, she realized something powerful: grief had made her forget what remained. Her children were alive. She still had breath in her lungs. The sun still rose. And she thought, if I don't find a way to bring back joy, not for me, but for them, this sadness will become our new home. And so she began to shift her perspective. Slowly, deliberately. At first, it was just pretending to smile so her kids wouldn't worry. Then it was choosing to laugh at small things. Eventually, the laughter felt real again. This wasn't denial, it was transformation. What she learned, and what she now teaches, is that pain can be a teacher if you're willing to listen. That choosing happiness isn't about ignoring the bad, but about remembering the good. The young man sat speechless, realizing that happiness, for her, wasn't inherited, it was rebuilt, piece by piece, after everything had fallen apart. The young man leaned forward, drawn in not just by the story, but by the sense of strength wrapped in gentleness. The old woman continued, now sharing the simple yet profound practice that transformed her days. Every morning, she said, before I even step out of bed, I whisper to myself, today is a new day, and I will find something good in it. She paused and smiled, as if replaying that quiet ritual in her mind. Not every day brings joy, but every day gives me a choice. And I choose to look for something, no matter how small, that reminds me life is still worth loving. At first, the young man found that idea almost too simple. Could something as basic as noticing a blooming flower, a warm breeze, or the laughter of a neighbor really shift the weight of sorrow? But she explained that joy does not come in giant waves, it arrives in tiny ripples. And if you're not paying attention, you'll miss them. That's why she trained her mind like a gardener tending fragile flowers, nurturing beauty even in the dry seasons. The young man asked, "But isn't that just pretending? Aren't you ignoring the bad?" She shook her head gently. "It's not ignoring the bad," she said. "It's refusing to let the bad blind me to the good. Pain will come. Loss will visit. That's part of life. But so is wonder. So is laughter. So is love. If you don't make room to notice them, the darkness will crowd them out." She told him about the mornings when she could barely get out of bed, how, even then, she would open her window, breathe the morning air, and thank the sky for still showing up. She practiced gratitude not because her life was easy, but because it was hard, and gratitude gave her power over it. "Happiness," she said, "is not the prize at the end of a perfect life. It's the daily habit of seeing beauty in an imperfect one." The young man sat back, feeling something stir deep inside, a quiet realization that perhaps joy wasn't something to find, but something to choose. As the young man stood to leave, something in him had shifted. He didn't feel instantly healed or magically enlightened, but he carried with him a new lens, a new way to look at the world. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel powerless. He decided to test her words. The next morning, instead of reaching for his phone, he stepped outside and watched the sunrise. It wasn't dramatic. The clouds were heavy. The light was soft. But something about that small moment calmed him. That day, he smiled at a neighbor he often ignored. He noticed the smell of bread from a nearby kitchen. He wrote down one thing he was thankful for before going to bed. It was clumsy at first. Some days he forgot. Other days he didn't feel like trying. But slowly, he started seeing patterns. The more he looked for beauty, the more it showed up. People noticed the difference in him. Friends who used to avoid his complaining began seeking his company. He found himself laughing more, worrying less, reacting slower. It didn't mean bad things stopped happening, they didn't. He still had arguments, he still had days that tested his patience. But now, he had an anchor. He had a reason to keep choosing better responses. Word of his transformation spread, and others in the village began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, the old woman's way of thinking wasn't just idealism, it was wisdom. One by one, others began visiting her. She never gave them a formula. She just asked questions, told stories, and offered presents. In time, a ripple of change moved through the village. Families talked more. Neighbors helped each other. People smiled at strangers. It wasn't a perfect town, but it became a kinder one. And all of it started not with wealth or luck or a grand event, but with one woman's decision to keep her heart soft through life's storms. Her happiness wasn't just her own anymore. It had become something greater, a seed planted in others, growing quietly, patiently, into something beautiful. Years passed, and the old woman grew older. Her steps became slower, her hands more fragile, but her eyes, those warm, steady eyes, still carried the same light. One morning, the village woke to the news that she had passed away peacefully in her sleep. It was a quiet departure, but the impact of her life was anything but small. The young man who had once sought her wisdom now stood before her home, surrounded by others who had been touched by her presence. They didn't cry out in sorrow, they celebrated. They shared stories of how her words had changed them, how her simple lessons had helped them find strength during hard times. They remembered how she had once said that even a blooming flower on a bad day was a reason to smile. And they realized something powerful: her life had not been extraordinary in wealth or status, but in meaning. She had taught them all the most important truth, that happiness is not a destination to chase, but a decision to make daily. It's not reserved for the lucky or the privileged. It's available to anyone willing to see life through a lens of appreciation rather than disappointment. The young man, now older himself, found others coming to him for advice, just as he had once sought hers. He never claimed to be a teacher, but when they asked how to be happy, he always smiled and said, "Let me tell you about a woman who taught me everything." The cycle continued not through lectures, but through example. Not through force, but through presence. That village, once ordinary, had become a living reminder that true happiness spreads not through grand gestures, but through quiet, consistent choices. And so, the story lives on not just in books or memories, but in every person who chooses to pause, to breathe, and to find something good, even in the middle of a storm. Because at the heart of it all, happiness is not a secret, it's a skill. And like any skill, it begins with the decision to try, even when life doesn't make it easy.